Anchoring bias. Also known as focalism or the anchoring effect, it occurs when people place a high value on the first piece of information they receive on a topic. This becomes their anchoring fact, upon which they base all of their subsequent decisions. For example, you are shopping for new shoes and come across a pair priced at $600 and another at $300. Because you saw the $600 pair first, you conclude that the $300 pair is inexpensive, despite the fact that you could undoubtedly purchase shoes for less. Hindsight bias. This happens when an outcome becomes evident after it has occurred, even though you could not have predicted it. Hindsight bias, often known as the curse of information, might lead us to believe that others possess information that we previously lacked. Essentially, it occurs when you realize you should have known something all along, but fail to recognize that you may not have had all of the required information. For example, one morning it appears to be slightly gray. When it rains later, you claim, "I knew that was going to happen." The Dunning-Kruger Effect. People with this bias perceive an idea or event as uncomplicated because they lack information on the subject. Dunning-Kruger causes people to overestimate their knowledge of something. In-group bias. In-group bias means that we are more likely to favor or support people from our own social group than outsiders. In-group bias occurs when we choose people who are similar to us, while missing out on opportunities to meet new, different people. Status quo bias. Status quo bias is the tendency to reject change or see it as a loss. This frequently leads to us sticking with the current situation of things, even if it is detrimental to our well-being. Observer bias. Observer bias is also known as an experimenter or research bias. This bias happens when observing or recording data. Our subjective thoughts or beliefs may lead us to interpret the facts we record differently than another observer would. It occurs when an observer approaches an experiment with preconceived beliefs or knowledge about what or who is being researched. Observer bias can also relate to a person's behavior while they are aware they are being observed. Confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the tendency to seek information that confirms previously held thoughts or views. This bias causes us to avoid or disregard evidence that may contradict or weaken our existing beliefs. It may also cause us to ask leading questions when seeking information in order to obtain the desired answers. Decline bias, also known as declinism, is the tendency to favor the past above the present. Decline bias argues that everything is gradually deteriorating just because it is changing. When we look back on things through rose-tinted glasses, we are exhibiting decline bias. It is related to status quo bias in that it discourages us from accepting change. For example, when you say, "Well, back in my day, music was so much better." Optimism bias. As the name implies, optimism bias occurs when we are in a good mood. It leads us to predict positive outcomes. Similarly, pessimism bias causes us to expect poor outcomes when we are depressed. This may be because of how we allow our emotions to interfere with facts, distorting the truth. For example, if you are in a good mood at a job interview, you may believe that you will be hired, regardless of whether you are qualified. Publication bias. Publication bias occurs when the outcome of a study or experiment influences whether or not the information is published. It may happen in academic research. For example, published research findings only revealed good outcomes and omitted evidence that might call these results into question. Halo effect. The halo effect occurs when we let our first encounter with a person, business, or topic influence our overall perception of that person or entity. The halo effect might cause individuals to attach good attributes to those who have a certain appearance. Self-serving bias. Self-serving bias is the belief that good things happen to us because we deserve them, whereas unpleasant things happen for causes beyond our control. Self-serving bias stops us from reflecting on ourselves and taking personal responsibility. For example, if you don't get a big promotion at work, it's because your employer despises you and is out to get you. But when you do, it's because you worked extremely hard and outperformed everyone else. Availability bias. The availability bias, also known as the availability heuristic, is a tendency to depend on information that is quick and easy to recall when drawing conclusions about a topic or idea, even if it is limited. It is a mental shortcut that allows people to value the most readily available information over more complex information. For example, buying a lottery ticket because of the luxurious lifestyle that comes with winning is appealing, despite the fact that the chances of winning are slim. Selection bias. This happens when groups or data collections for analysis are not picked at random. This implies that the sample will not be representative of the general population. For example, selection bias might emerge in a study if all of the volunteers were the same age or gender and did not represent the general population. Affinity bias. Affinity bias is the inclination to favor people who have similar interests, backgrounds, and experiences as us. Because of affinity bias, we like to be among people who are similar to us. We also automatically reject those who act or appear differently from us. For example, a hiring manager may favor a candidate because they attended the same school. Ageism. Ageism is prejudice or discrimination directed at people based on their age. It is most commonly associated with the elderly, but it can also affect youngsters. Ageism has a negative influence on both physical and mental health, and reports link it to early death. Ageism can take many forms, such as losing a job due to your age, being denied interest-free credit, a new credit card, auto insurance, or travel insurance due to your age, or receiving lower quality treatment in a shop or restaurant due to the organization's attitude towards older people. Framing effect. The framing effect occurs when people react differently to something based on whether it is portrayed positively or negatively. In other words, our choice is impacted more by how information is presented than by what is said. For example, while grocery shopping, you notice 2 different beef items. Both cost and weigh the same. One is marked 80% lean, and the other 20% fat. When comparing the two, you decide that 20% fat seems too unhealthy, so you go with the 80% lean choice. Overconfidence bias. Overconfidence bias is the tendency to overestimate one's knowledge and talents in a certain field. People's perceptions of risk and achievement frequently differ from reality because they have inaccurate beliefs about their performance, behavior, or characteristics. Overconfidence bias can influence decision-making and limit our ability to exercise caution. For example, college students frequently overestimate their ability to complete a paper and are compelled to pull an all-nighter when they discover it takes longer than anticipated. The misinformation effect is the tendency for memories to be significantly influenced by events that occurred after the original event. A person who observes a car accident or a crime may assume that their memory is crystal clear, but studies have discovered that memory is remarkably sensitive to even small effects.